Great. Hi, my name is Anna Wilson, and today I will be talking to you about the article Turning Off the School to Prison Pipeline by Harry Wilson. As you probably already know, I really think this topic is interesting. I'm actually writing a research paper about it in my sociology class, and so this class is also the perfect hand in hand to research it a little bit more for that class and for this class as well. So I'd like to start off with a little quote. The first sentence in this article is zero tolerance practices of exclusionary discipline fuel school failure and push students into the justice system. So the school to prison pipeline is the causal link between educational and exclusion and criminalization of youth. And so they'll go into talking more about zero tolerance and how that goes hand in hand with the school to prison pipeline. Some of these statistics, which we've talked about in class before from documentaries that we have watched, such as 13th, they're also reiterated in here. And so the U.S. has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of its prisoners. Prison populations have quadrupled since the 1980s. African Americans are subjected to incarceration 6 times more than white people. And 2 million people, or 2 million children, have parents that are incarcerated. And I just think that's like sickening. And these kids are then 5 times more likely to go to prison themselves. And half of those who enter prison don't have a high school diploma. And so these issues are just staggering and really astounding to think about. So in the 80s and 90s, they had this super predator like idea. And so this led to more violence and crime. But it also led to larger penalties and like harsher tactics and strategies that were used to try and keep people in line. And so as an outcome of the states and the federal government having this harsher punishment, schools started using those court tactics. And so things in schools started to get even more harsh, and there were larger penalties for juveniles. So it says on page 50 that schools started using the same tactics as courts to get rid of the students who get in the way of learning. And so we see that today with expulsion and with suspensions. And so this led, like I said, to harsher disciplinary actions, behavior issues and reporting that, and then police officers in schools, which we see today, and then, like I said, exclusion as a punishment. So zero tolerance, the definition is part of the definition, it casts all social problems as issues of security. So instead of saying, oh, this is what's happening, we need to fix it, it's, oh, we're keeping our schools safe, so we have to take these students out, or we have to punish them more, instead of dealing with the issue directly. It refers to strict, uncompromising, automatic punishment to eliminate undesirable behavior. They actually removed homeless people off the streets to try and decrease crime, and they're doing the same things in schools. When you take a student out of the classroom to allow other students to learn more, you're taking away their opportunity to learn. One really interesting thing in this article that I hadn't thought of before was the relationship between zero tolerance and zero reject. So for students with disabilities, there's zero reject, which basically says you can't deny education because someone is unteachable. You can't tell them they can't learn. Well, in zero tolerance, if you have somebody who's misbehaved, who has brought something to school they shouldn't have, they're being taken out of the school system, being sent home, and they're being denied that education. And so basically we are going against zero reject, which is a law. They have stricter punishment as well. We see that a lot with dress code. I've seen a lot of different articles online where girls will wear shorts that are not revealing or dresses to prom that are not revealing, and they get dress coded for and get sent home and are either not able to learn or not able to take part in whatever activity is going on in the school. There was an Ohio 5th grader who was suspended for 3 days for showing this and pretending to like shoot. 3 days for going like that. And that's just ridiculous. That situation would have been all right to take the student into the hallway and say, look, this isn't appropriate right now. There are a lot of things that are going on in the country, and so that's not a good thing to do in a classroom, but it's not something that you should take the student out of school for 3 days. Minority students are also more likely to be put in the juvenile justice system as well. So over half of the students will experience in-school suspension throughout their schooling years, and 31% will experience 2 days out of school suspension at least once in their schooling. And that one suspension equals 5 times more likely to drop out. And suspended as discipline, they are 3 times more likely to be in contact with the juvenile justice system. So I read a lot of these articles about the school to prison pipeline and issues and all the problems, but a lot of these articles don't really talk about how to fix it. They might say, oh, like we can do this, but there's not really like an outline with a lot of ideas. And this is one of the first articles that has given me really good ideas on how to stop that. So as you can see here, I have a whole list, but I'm going to focus on what I've highlighted in blue. And so mutual trust. Mutual trust is a huge one, because if your students don't trust you and you don't trust them, they're not going to learn from you. I've witnessed this in a positive way in the classroom I'm in now. Just yesterday, the teacher, Mrs. Emmons, she had a little boy come up and hug her, and she goes, oh, I love you so much, and she's showing that love and that compassion. And that creates, for those students, trust and allowing them to see that they're loved and they are valued in that classroom. And that leads straight into a caring learning environment. If they know that they're loved, they feel like they're safe in that classroom, and they are able to take risks and take the information they're thinking in their head and talk about it and not be afraid, which will lead to less punishment, because they're able to talk about it before doing anything or learn from their experiences. And finally, putting the student's needs first. There was a little girl in my classroom yesterday who came in crying, and there's a whole bunch of sick going around in my classroom right now, and this is a first grade class, and she was crying and hugging the other Mount student that was in the room with me and just didn't feel good. And so I asked her, like, did you eat breakfast? And she goes, no, I didn't eat breakfast. And she had gone to breakfast at the school in the morning, but she didn't feel good and her stomach hurt, so she didn't eat anything. And by this point, it was like 10 o'clock, and they still had 3 more centers and recess to go to before lunch. And she was not going to be able to focus on her work. And so I talked to their teacher and I got her some pretzels, and she felt so much better. And so by putting those student needs first, instead of saying, you're crying, you're not doing your work, you need to go sit in the corner, go out in the hallway, don't do this, do your work, we needed to meet those needs first, that she was hungry and she didn't feel good. And so because we met that, she could focus on her work later. So the bigger picture here in the whole light of education is taking these things and these challenges to the pipeline and actually putting them in the classroom. This added to my knowledge base because I saw some of the challenges that we can use to go against the school-to-prison pipeline, which a lot of the articles that I've read about it hasn't told me. And finally, this adds to our dialogue in the classroom because we can talk more about caring environments and the learning community. We focus a lot on some of the bad things and some of the things that we can do largely on a large scale and how to make like a big impact, but we also can use these different tactics to talk about smaller things in the classroom and being able to communicate with students who are at a younger age and allow them to feel love and sympathy in the classroom as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And here's my